Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. My name's Janette Hughes. I'm Director of Planning and Performance for the Digital Health and Care Innovation Centre. We're located in Scotland, which you probably gather from my accent. So we're delighted to actually be here in person today. We've been involved in the project with all the partners that have spoke previously, and it's a great privilege to be part of the Interreg project. Our kind of focus within the project is really looking at what happens next. So what's the long-term options and what's the long-term opportunities, I suppose, for hospitalisation at home. One thing I would say, and it's actually been covered really well with other presentations, is that we have done and learned so much over the last 3 to 4 years on actually some of the challenges and equally the opportunities for hospitalisation at home. On the left-hand side of this slide, you will see the home hospitalisation platform, which has been described both from a technical perspective and also from a clinical and user perspective on how it's actually been deployed. And from that, we have learned so much. I was saying yesterday at our project meeting, you know, to be a fly in the wall with some of the conversations, some of the lessons learned, and some of the kind of advantages of being so closely knit into a project is a privilege. However, we now have to tell the rest of the world what we've actually done and disseminate that knowledge exchange. One thing is very clear, and I think it's certainly a global opportunity, is the opportunity is massive. It's become more acute, obviously due to COVID. However, just now the value of this market is about 300 billion. And it's due to rise by 7-8%. There's some leading countries that are leading the way that have done hospitalisation at home for many years. However, even with that opportunity, it's still a very young market, and the technologies that are emerging. With the Chance project that obviously we're involved in and speaking today on behalf, you see the framework that we have here. We use this in DHI in Scotland, really just trying to imagine where products are, where services are, and where businesses are. And one thing that we believe is actually it takes a lot of people to move innovation for digital health and care. And we've already heard from many different perspectives today. So we believe you've really got to converge technology readiness, service readiness and business readiness to actually make it happen. With Chance, you'll see the blue boxes here is where we've actually got to. So we have still got a lot to learn. And actually, even though the end of this project is in May, it's really only the start of the journey of actually trying to understand how you scale innovation and actually embed it within services as business as usual. And that's the ultimate goal for most projects, most organisations, whether you're an industry player or whether you're an organisation that delivers services to your customers, which are patients and their circle of care. So understanding all of this takes a long time. And we have developed, as part of the project, an innovation hub. And we've started to look at sharing some of the best practice that we've learned in Chance, but equally pulling in other best practice. So our vision, you know, and I suppose the question for me was, in presenting this session, is what next? So, you know, our vision is to build an innovation hub, which we've already done, but actually fill it with real people that are interested in driving this forward, real innovations that are maybe at different levels with regards to technology readiness levels, bringing together different organisations who are also on the journey of trying to scale hospitalisation at home. And those people are the people that are delivering services that need to understand better how do you do it. And I think a few of my colleagues in the project mentioned things like blueprints, etc. So for us, the other key component is the skills that are necessary. And I think actually every presentation touched on there is not enough skills or knowledge on how to do this. So that's a key component of driving this forward. To date, now the Innovation Hub is live and we do have a QR code and we have a website and you can go and join today, and we've already ran a couple of events. But for the next couple of years, what is the roadmap for us? And we're very keen for those that are virtually with us or here in person for you to actually connect into the Innovation Hub so we can carry on the journey. Just now we have content within that Innovation Hub, but the more important aspect is what are we going to do over the next 12 to 18 months. One thing I will say is that we are not alone on this journey. However, it's quite difficult to find the other people that are trying to do the same thing as us. And there's lots of different networks that are, on this quest, and we've connected with them and we will connect them into the Innovation Hub. People like John Hopkins in the USA, we are closely tied into him. We've ran a couple of events. Hospitalisation at home is very big in the UK and within Scotland, and we have our own networks that we can fold in. So I suppose what I'm saying is collaboration is key. And even sitting here today with however many are on virtual and people sitting in the room, we need to drive it and actually build the momentum around this. So we've got a number of different features that we want to bring into the Innovation Hub. The first one is you've heard from hospitals, organisations that need to test, validate, prove and give comfort to their decision makers that this can actually work. So we want to do matchmaking. We want to, for hospitals around the UK, Europe, the rest of the world, to put up their hand to say, we actually want to do more trials. And we want to matchmake them with industry players that often have the innovation, but it's quite difficult to find. So that's the kind of matchmaking aspect. The second point really is the kind of foundation layer. And that is the training that's required. And it's the why would you do hospitalisation at home is maybe one question and one skill. And how to do it is the other. And we've found a lot from the Chance project on how to do it and why you would do it, but there needs to be more of that. So we're proposing through the Innovation Hub to develop specific training and personal development modules so that people can come to us as they already have started to do because we have the experience. Now, I'm saying it as if we're the only ones with the experience. As part of this Innovation Hub, we want to bring others with us that have experience to share and to make sure that that cross-learning happens across the board. The third aspect is actually where is the innovation? And I don't just mean industry technical innovation, I also mean service innovation. There's so much innovation to understand to make this work. And I think that we need to have a place to showcase what is already happening. We heard some innovation from the guys at Passion who've developed it, but how hard would it be for somebody that isn't at this event to find that tool? So I really want, and I really think there's a place for us to congregate virtually and hopefully sometimes in person to actually drive this sector forward. So although the project's coming to an end, the Innovation Hub will, carry on, and we have got quite ambitious plans. But really at the heart of the plans is really to share knowledge and make sure we actually can gather momentum and drive hospitalisation at home forward. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope you will join me in joining the Innovation Hub. There's a QR code there, and please do follow us on Twitter and you'll get it through the European network. So thank you.
So I'm talking a little bit about, also the future, and we call it internally DoctorME 2.0, actually to really achieve this paradigm change. And as you heard, what we actually want to do, or what we are doing, is self-care of patients with the interaction with self-monitoring, and this already works quite well. There is also a treatment plan and some prescription right now, and I'm coming back to that, why this is the case. It's not yet self-prescription, but this is really the aim of DoctorME 2.0, to really have a real substitution of care. Because with what we are talking about, actually to only see patients if they are really ill, of course, this to some extent is already substitution of care, but we need to go further than this. And that's what we actually want to achieve on a longer term basis. Actually, we are convinced that we can replace care. Well, the colors are here not very well, but at least 70% of care can be done by patients. Personally, I think this can be even more. But of course, it needs to be 100% safe, and it needs to work. That are the goals also on longer term. But very importantly, and this is an important reason why this is still the healthcare professional in between, that we need to have a large randomized controlled trial to really prove that this is safe. Personally, I think that it's even better than standard of care. You have seen how variable actually the implementation already of current guidelines are. I didn't show you the percentage of really optimized therapy, and there are some registries, and we're talking about, depending on the definition, 10%, maybe 20% of the patients that are really on target therapy. So there is a lot of room for improvement, and we are convinced that DoctorME can really change in this. This is the basic principle that, in fact, with the use of patient data, but also with the existing knowledge about the patient, of the patient information, using the guidelines, but also artificial intelligence, actually treatment advice will become a treatment decision if it's relatively standard of straightforward. So if the engine comes to the conclusion that this advice is safe with a high probability directly to the patient, and if it remains uncertain, high complexity, the caregiver will be in between. There will be, or there are some feedback loops via experts, but also data-driven, actually to improve this system. And we are also using external training cohorts. And the basis for the artificial intelligence part was also an external training cohort. You have seen already, an example provided by Hesam, how these algorithms actually work. So there are kind of decision trees based on the guidelines, and this is programmed or needs to be programmed. It's still more in the bulk, but it needs to be programmed in kind of micro models, also to make it flexible to adjust if needed. And there is a need for direct linking with the artificial intelligence part. Just the basic principles. Of course, I'm not an expert in that. I'm a medical doctor, but as far as I understand is with the company we're working together, is what they are using are different types of technology, not just one, and that makes them quite flexible and also able to have AI prediction in relatively small groups of patients. So as compared to many others where 10,000s of patients are required actually to come up with decisions, with this approach, it's possible to do that with 500 to 1,000 patients. I think this is a big advantage and also provides important flexibility. Initially, we used a relatively old cohort, the time CHF, because there we have quite some detailed information and data. And what you also can see is There are quite some patients, despite this was a study for optimizing therapy, were not on official optimal therapy. But you can also see that some, despite actually not being on optimal therapy, have a good prognosis. And on the other hand, despite being on optimal therapy, having a poor prognosis. So this actually provides the basis to have some changes or some differences with the guidelines. But of course, this needs to be prospectively tested. And in the end, longer term, the idea is to really have clinical input, biomarkers. For this model, a lot of biomarkers were used, but also in the future, genomic input, actually to have different regimens for individual patients. And in the end, primarily done by the patient himself. So this is the long-term vision, to have an autonomous system that the treatment decision goes to the patients. This needs further development for future-proof technology, that also smaller and individual adaptations are possible. That's something we need to work on. Of course, we discussed already about autonomous data input, avatar patient records. Of course, there needs to be a link with healthcare data, but there need to be also input from sensors to make it less complicated for patients. In fact, and this is the question what you posed, is how actually what works now. Is it now the guidelines or is it AI? Right now, as you heard, because of not yet having this prospective testing, it's actually providing both, but we are working on combining this, and there are possibilities. For instance, the guidelines are in some instances quite black and white, so very certain you need to do that, you must do that. But there are also points where the guidelines are less clear, where you could do that or you may consider. And there we are convinced there is room for AI actually to take over decisions, and actually by combining that to have a better decision making for individual patients. And of course, there are safety requirements. That's our plan a little bit to the future. Within patient HF, we actually developed, we call it DoctorME, you heard that already, and it's version 1.0 containing more or less in parallel the guideline-based algorithm and the AI-based algorithms. We are currently testing that and also do that during, or continue that during the capitalization phase. We use feedback to further improve, to come to basically a product that can be commercialized from 23, 24 with these abilities. We are convinced that it's already possible to automatically adjust diuretic therapy, because this is also recommended by the guidelines, that the patients are able to do that by themselves. In parallel, we go further in developing or optimizing to come to DoctorME 2.0, and this then in blue needs to be tested in a large randomized controlled trial, because only that will be sufficiently convincing. But this takes another, well, then 4 years. So we're talking about 27, 28. And in parallel, of course, business plan, safety issue, legal issues, etc., need to be addressed. So that's a little bit, well, our timelines and also where we want to go into the future. Thank you. One important point, I said I will show the partners within Passion HF, and here is the slide. So we have clinical partners, technical partner, patient aspects, and also business support. So with the capitalization, we now have 5 clinical partners: Aachen, Belfast, Dublin, and well, the University of Suffolk. Technical partner, Janette, Thomas More, which is a high school, Neurogames, and Exploris, that's the AI company. We have a foundation that deals with chronically ill patients in Germany, and, well, a business partner that actually supports us with business, that's RIMS in Belgium. Thank you.
important question is what next? And that's my main questions to you all panelists. What should be next, not in a larger perspective, but a concrete first step we have to do now? And perhaps when you answer that question, for example, Luc, you can introduce yourself very briefly.
A colleague of Mark, so working with EHTEL, but today representing another project that Mark has already mentioned, which is vCare. And vCare has a lot of similarities in terms of cross-cutting functions with DoctorME, actually. And that's, for me, to answer clearly your question, is that that's a very important problem today, is that innovation goes quick. And so when you have to decide as a businessman in a hospital whatsoever, what solution to choose, you want to have some kind of stability. You don't want to reinvest every 2 years in a new solution, especially if there is any kind of disruption. So that's difficult. And indeed, to be reimbursed, you need to provide evidence. And, well, we know that what we have in the project is far from sufficient. We have also a problem because we see the number of platforms multiplying. We have platform for data. We have platform for vertical integration based on use case, clinical use case, tactical use case. We have also platforms working on horizontal integration, so integrating care teams and so on. And now you have meta platforms, and that's what we need. We need actually an ecosystem to integrate all those nice developments. But I don't think personally that if we go in the same direction, creating new products which are all independent, I think we go nowhere. I think that that's the key problem today. The key element for me today is usability. Before even evidence, before trust. That's what the documentation and the key experiment tells today. So we need solutions easily implemented by the key stakeholders. And for me, the next step is indeed to simplify the solution as much as possible. So that means, for example, in vCare, we work with an avatar also, which is but all the typical problems of that the patient can have at home using Wi-Fi, or dealing with that avatar needs to be simplified at the maximum. So there is only any possibility for the patient to communicate is made easy. It can be via the voice, via the screen, via messaging. It doesn't has to be something which is imposed to the patient, but which the patient chooses.
Thank you.
So I'm sitting here from industry side. So what's clear to me is we could make technology perfect. It still wouldn't get, we could do all the RCTs and have a fantastic evidence base. There's still a massive block to deployment, and that's change management. I mean, you know, there's loads and loads of fantastic technologies, things out there. Everybody knows treating patients at home is better, but changing service delivery is incredibly difficult. So what we are doing personally is, first of all, and the other thing to say is hospital at home isn't just one thing. I mean, a hospital is an incredibly complex environment that has many, many different services. So which of those services are the ones that suit hospital at home best and easiest and have the lowest barrier to entry? So first of all, it's kind of identifying those niche service deliveries that you can show, that you can get the quick wins from. Because, you know, once you've shown it works really well in this service, then you can try and replicate in other disease states, in other patient cohorts. So I know we're talking about heart failure today, but actually, you know, the one thing I've learned is what an awful complex disease it is, very, very difficult to manage. And it's not, I don't believe, until DoctorME 2.0 is up and running that it's really going to work in the community. But there are other conditions that you could get patients out of hospital easier with a bit of technology and remote monitoring, treat them at home. So that's number one. But number two is, who are those service delivery partners? Because I think leaving it all to the hospital, to you've now, with all the stuff that you've got to do, just after a pandemic and with a 1-year backlog, you've also now got to innovate in these new services when you don't have enough nurses anyway. Is very, very difficult. So we're finding some kind of really innovative partners, business partners who are starting to support home hospitalisation services. So coming from a not clinical background, but upskilling themselves. So one partner that we've been working with who has developed this quite successfully in the US in conjunction with Mayo Clinic started off as...
We know them too,
started off as a customer services company. You know, and they said to Mayo, "Oh, we'll just do your booking for you. You know, you don't worry about." And then they started following up. Okay, now we'll do your patient satisfaction post calls. Now they do surgical post calls after discharge, and they started to move into home delivery. So I think find the quick wins and find innovative service partners, that it's just not all down to the hospitals having to change themselves.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Okay, Hans-Peter.
Yeah, well, of course, I tried to make this a little bit clear, and I think it's not one single thing. It's actually, of course, I'm not a business person.
We want to challenge you. You understand?
No, of course, I'm not a business person. I'm a medical doctor, and of course, the clinical proof, validation from the clinical side, to me is obviously more important than it is for you.
But then the other way. Do you have a tip for the commercial partners?
Well,
what do you think they should do as first step?
I think the tips are on both sides. It's actually going in both directions, because obviously I learned also from business partners such as Janette, for instance, also another way of thinking how you actually bring this forward. And I think, the connection is a very important one, and to have really concrete plans, what we are doing also right now, that we have a way how we are going now to really optimize with clear time plans, and then also to commercialize with a validation part, to do in parallel a business development with concrete plans how to implement that. And in parallel to think about further developments also on the technical part. I think that's the way to go. To me personally, it's not just one single thing, but it's actually the expertise of everybody. And of course, we need to join efforts. That's very clear, and it's interesting also to hear from Luc. They're working on something that he thinks can actually help, or that we can interact, because it's not about, reinventing the wheel all by ourselves, but really to join efforts and to see how we can take advantage of each other.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. Janette.
I mean, I would agree with, I suppose, what everybody said before. I think change management is one of the biggest blockers. I think actually bigger than change management is finance and reimbursement. And actually for that, you need leadership. And unless you bring the leadership along with you, nothing will change. So whether it's political leadership, reimbursement models, insurers, investors, you can't do much without actually releasing funds somewhere. And I think it's been well proven that it's quite difficult to actually have cost savings with digital health sometimes. It's usually cost avoidance, which then struggles to make the business case. So I think from my perspective, it's very much about change management and leadership. And collaboration. We cannot do this on our own. Digital health and care innovation generally takes decades to scale. But if you look at COVID, it doesn't have to take decades. And the changes that were made for COVID was all about leadership.
Okay, yeah, as a short introduction, my name is Rooijakkers. I live in the Netherlands, and I joined healthcare fairly recently as a sales and business development, and to help them bring healthcare at home along. I have a history in the medical device business, but on the treatment side. And what intrigues me here is that we hear that we want to take the treatment preferably away from the hospital to the home care. And I heard already a little bit today about not just treating, but maybe also improving on a patient stage. Heard a little bit also about prevention. Prevention of hospital-acquired conditions, maybe, but also we can think about maybe about improving a patient's conditions before he goes into the hospital. And there's a field called ERAS, for example, it's early recovery after surgery that focuses on doing the right things before the surgery in order to be capable of sustaining the surgery better. And this might also be an opportunity where telemonitoring or home care, I should say, not telemonitoring, home care could provide maybe relief, or could allow the patients to do this at home instead of having to come to a clinic or to a private practice to do this. So what's next? I think there's developments on info gathering and sharing. So we spoke about sensors. There will be a lot of development on how smart the sensors get. From I think that was a nice terminology, from patient triggered to continuous, but those sensors then can be integrated into the platform. So there will be development of new sensors, and the platform needs to be able to interact with those sensors and then share all that information to whatever the next step is. And the other side of that is, when you have that information, is how you make the decision. Is that decision going to be physician based, or as has been explained a few times today, is that also decision based on artificial intelligence, which further then take a little bit more work away from the physician? I like that. I like that a lot. So this platform as an orchestrator between decision makers and information gatherers, whether that's a device or a person.
Yeah, hi. Probably a question more for Frank, but it's really about CE marking and how we move forward with the home hospitalisation platform. Clearly, there are some barriers to development and additional funding required to move us on to the next stage. Just wondering, are there any immediate plans to do that, or to go through that the new medical device regulations that are coming into play?
I think short interruption. That's not only the part of CE marking in itself, but also in the meaning of CE marking, that in that way you can go to the market. And what I think for all those projects is important, that you can go to the market as quickly as possible in terms of presence, but also to get additional money for the continuity of projects, because you can't use on a continuous base grants as a kind of lifeline. In the end, you have to prove that it's really market proof. Frank, perhaps you can add something on the question of Alan about CE marking as a
MDR has clearly defined rules on what you need to do as software as a medical device. That includes a lot of clinical information, I think more than a lot of the platforms or solutions have been able to provide so far. So that's something that's also a revolving theme, I think, in today's meeting, that people are asking for clinical evidence, and MDR is one of them. If you want to have your device your software C approved, you need to provide clinical device, clinical evaluation report, clinical evaluation plan. So pre-device approval and even post-device approval, you need to provide clinical.
And there is an
clinical
additional
evidence.
comment.
There is a very clear path.
There is an additional comment from Luc.
Yeah, on this, and maybe on also on something else. What I see is that hospitalization at home, but the at home paradigm as such actually relies on a number of key components, which are reused by all projects. And what I see now more and more, and that's also in link with the medical device regulation, there are a number of things which could be solved by agreeing on which components can be reused. I'm thinking about safety, identification management, this kind of cybersecurity. Those basic building blocks should be clearly referred. If you use them, you're safe. You are in the right direction for already part of your assessment, the risk assessment process for the MDR. And also from a business perspective, you offer then the possibility to develop all the services, not only one. You deal with hospitalization, with rehabilitation, and with lifelong coaching. So that's only that way that I think that we will have a real scalability, which will be sufficiently attractive.
So I want to thank everybody to participate in this panel discussion. For myself, there is also a kind of learning at the moment that this discussion isn't finished yet. Perhaps in a kind of initiative, we should have a meeting with commercial partners of the both project and some other partners to talk more in concrete what could be next steps, not only for the from the commercial perspective of the project, but also as a kind of in-kind, but also other funding to help to bring this project further and to avoid that they will stop after the grant period. Okay, thank you everybody.
I would like to thank you all for participating in this symposium. I think it's a very relevant topic, hospital care at home. And what I've learned from today is that it's not only important to have good technology, to have good ideas, but also to collaborate, also to show leadership and to pay attention to change management. So it was my pleasure to host this joint event.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Of course, I fully agree, and it was a real pleasure, and I really liked this exchange of ideas, learning from both projects. I really would like to thank, well, everybody here in the room, of course, particularly the speakers, but all that really participating, because you were giving important input, and I'm really looking forward to further collaboration. And I wish you a very nice day.